What if the places you thought were safe held memories of fear and despair? Have you ever walked past an old building and felt an unsettling chill run down your spine? Tonight, we're uncovering the chilling true stories of haunted locations, places where the past refuses to stay buried and the echoes of their dark histories linger. These accounts will make you question every creak and shadow in your own home. But before we start, I just want to give a huge shout out to all of you. Your support is the heartbeat of this channel, and I'm beyond grateful for this incredible community. If you are enjoying our content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a spine-tingling upload. And if you want to support us and help us grow, there are a few simple ways you can contribute. Sharing the videos, leaving a comment, or even checking out our support options on Patreon or Ko-Fi would be greatly appreciated. Your support makes a huge difference and helps us keep bringing you top-notch content. Thank you again for being a part of this journey with me. And now, let's dive into the darkness together. As a college student studying history, I was drawn to the Old Oak Inn in Millfield, a place steeped in local legends. Rumors circulated about the inn being haunted by a bride who took her own life after her fiancé vanished on their wedding day. Intrigued, I decided to stay there for the weekend to see if the stories held any truth. Upon my arrival, I was greeted by Mrs. Hargrove, the elderly innkeeper. She had a warm demeanor, but her eyes reflected something deeper, something unsettling. "Just be careful, dear. Some guests feel things," she cautioned. I dismissed her warning as just a way to scare off troublemakers. That night, I lay in bed, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The sounds of the inn, a creaking floor and distant whispers, played tricks on my mind. Unable to sleep, I grabbed my flashlight and decided to explore. I wandered the dimly lit halls until I found a library filled with dust-covered books. As I scanned the titles, a cold draft swept through the room, sending chills down my spine. I turned, convinced I heard a soft sobbing. My heart raced as I moved deeper into the library, where a framed photograph on the wall caught my attention. It was a wedding portrait of a young woman in a flowing white dress, her expression sorrowful. Feeling uneasy, I decided to leave, but was drawn back by the sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway. I followed the sound, but as I turned a corner, it stopped. I shook my head, convincing myself it was just my imagination. The next morning, I mentioned my experiences to Mrs. Hargrove. Her face turned pale as she recounted the tragic history of the inn. "The bride never really left," she whispered. "Her spirit is said to wander, searching for her fiancé." I was determined to uncover the truth. After speaking with locals, I learned about the mysterious circumstances surrounding the couple. They were set to marry when the fiancé vanished, and the bride, heartbroken, had taken her life in the inn. That evening, armed with my camera and notebook, I returned to the library, hoping to capture some evidence of the supernatural. As I settled in, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I called out softly, "Is anyone here?" Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and I could see my breath. A flicker of movement caught my eye, and I saw the outline of the bride standing at the far end of the room. My heart raced as she turned to look at me. Her face was filled with sadness, and I felt an overwhelming urge to comfort her. "What do you want?" I asked softly. "I need to find him," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Before I could process her words, the lights flickered and went out completely, plunging me into darkness. Panic set in as I fumbled for my flashlight. When I finally turned it on, she was gone, but I could still feel her presence. I decided to search for clues about her fiancé. Over the next few days, I dug through local archives and spoke to residents, piecing together fragments of their story. I discovered that her fiancé had been involved in a tragic accident, but the details were murky. That night, I returned to the inn, resolved to confront the spirit again. As I entered the library, I felt a heavy weight in the air. "I know what happened," I called out, hoping to make a connection. A moment later, I heard the soft sobbing again. The bride materialized in front of me, her eyes filled with longing. "Help me find him," she pleaded. Just as I was about to speak, I heard a loud crash from the back of the inn. I jumped, adrenaline surging, and ran toward the sound. As I approached, I found Mrs. Hargrove standing over a fallen shelf, her expression frantic. "We need to leave now," she urged, her voice trembling. "Why?" I asked, confusion setting in. "This place? It has a way of trapping people," she said, glancing nervously at the shadows. "You shouldn't be here." Suddenly the atmosphere shifted, the lights flickered violently, and I felt a chill run through me. "What's happening?" I demanded. Before she could answer, the bride's figure reappeared, more frantic than before. "Help me!" she screamed, but then her voice morphed into something deeper, echoing with rage. "You're not leaving!" In a moment of sheer panic, I grabbed Mrs. Hargrove and ran back toward the exit. As we reached the front door, it slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. I could feel the oppressive weight of the inn closing in around us. "Let me go!" I screamed at the bride, feeling trapped in a nightmare. But she was relentless, her sorrow morphing into something darker, a hunger for revenge. Just then, Mrs. Hargrove pulled a key from her pocket and frantically unlocked the door. We burst outside into the night, gasping for breath as the inn loomed behind us, silent once more. As we hurried away, I glanced back, seeing the bride standing in the window, her expression a mix of sorrow and fury. "I won't let you escape," she seemed to say. Weeks later, I learned the inn had been closed indefinitely after a fire broke out. Strangely, no one was inside. Mrs. Hargrove had vanished without a trace, and the last thing I saw before leaving was that haunting photograph of the bride, her sorrowful gaze forever etched in my mind. And to this day, I wonder if the bride ever found her fiancé, or if she was still trapped in that haunted place, waiting for someone else to join her. I live in an apartment building that's over 50 years old, and it has a history of strange occurrences. To give you some background, when I was about 5, there was a Christmas lunch at our place. One of our neighbors invited friends over, one of whom was struggling with the fallout from his parents' divorce and dealing with depression. He asked to use the bathroom, but instead, he locked himself in a bedroom. Tragically, before anyone could intervene, he ended his life. I still vividly remember seeing him fall that day, and my neighbor has lived with the regret of not noticing his distress sooner. Fast forward a few months, I was in my small studio, engrossed in an episode of Digimon. My mom and grandma were in the kitchen preparing dinner when I suddenly heard a female voice calling my name. At first, I thought it was my mom, so I muted the TV to listen closely. Instead of my mom's voice, I began to hear a soft humming. Confused, I thought maybe there was an issue with the TV since it was supposed to be muted. Just as I was about to tell my parents, I realized the sound wasn't coming from the TV at all. It was right next to me, about half a meter away. Terrified, I ran to the kitchen, and my mom reassured me that everything with the TV was fine. Years later, odd events began happening more frequently. The security guards often reported seeing a white figure emerge from the parking area, lingering in front of pedestrians before sometimes rising into the sky. These eerie sightings were even captured on CCTV, but eventually stopped once the camera system was upgraded. Guards shared stories of hearing loud screams and whistling in the parking lot late at night. When they checked, it was always too late for any pranksters, as it was the dead of night. The whistling seemed to move around, sometimes rising into the air, and it was clear it wasn't just the wind. Many residents reported hearing their names called by voices of both genders. Dark shapes have appeared multiple times in the basement, scaring those who encountered them. I even saw a little girl, around 4 or 5 years old, run into my apartment. She wore a white dress and had straight black hair, and as far as I know, no child of that age has passed away in our building. The most frustrating experience occurred a few years ago, when my dog started waking me up every night between 3:10 and 3:40 a.m. for 2 months straight. With high school assignments piling up, I could barely get any sleep. My dog would bark uncontrollably, terrified, and fixated on the front door. I reached out to security to see if they had noticed any unusual activity, but they didn't seem to have any answers. I even suggested they keep an eye out for a potential sleepwalker. During the first 2 weeks, the lack of sleep drove me nearly mad. I had to keep my dog in my bedroom, holding him close until he felt secure, which sometimes took hours. Eventually, my dad and I noticed something odd. Before my dog would bark, the automatic lights on our floor would turn on as if someone were approaching. They would stop right outside our door, triggering my dog's frantic barking. One night, my dad flung the door open, hoping to find the source of the disturbances, but there was no one there. My dog stood trembling in the doorway, growling and barking in fear. This relentless cycle continued for another 6 weeks. I eventually had to stop letting my dog sleep in my room because he would just start barking again. The situation was maddening for both of us, and I was sure none of my neighbors were getting much rest either. In a moment of frustration, I yelled at the presence, demanding it leave me and my dog alone. I even prayed for it to find peace. After a while, the disturbances finally stopped, bringing an end to our sleepless nights. In a small town, there stood an ancient, crumbling asylum that everyone whispered about. It was notorious for its chilling history, with tales of patients subjected to cruel experiments and some who simply vanished without a trace. The most unsettling rumor claimed that the asylum was a gateway to a dark realm, where lost souls roamed freely, and those who entered were never seen again. My close friend, Alex, and I were captivated by the supernatural, and we often sought out thrilling adventures. One evening, fueled by curiosity and bravado, we decided to explore the abandoned asylum. We waited until midnight, knowing that the police frequently patrolled the area during the day. Equipped with flashlights, a few snacks, and my trusty pocket knife, we drove to the foreboding building. As we parked, a thick fog crept over the ground, wrapping around the asylum like a shroud. It was an eerie sight, but we brushed it off and approached the entrance, only to find the heavy door barred. Undeterred, we found a window that had been shattered for years and climbed inside. The air inside was stifling and thick with the scent of decay. Our flashlights flickered as we ventured deeper into the asylum, revealing long-abandoned rooms filled with broken furniture and peeling wallpaper. The atmosphere felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were watching us. As we explored, I noticed a strange odor wafting through the air, a mix of rust and something charred. "Do you smell that?" I asked Alex, wrinkling my nose. "Yeah, it's gross. Let's keep moving," he replied, trying to hide his unease. We stumbled upon a long corridor that opened into a large common room. The far wall was marred by a jagged hole, likely created by time and neglect. Vines snaked through the cracks, giving the room an almost surreal, overgrown appearance. But as I shone my flashlight toward the hole, my vision blurred, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, concern etching his features. Before I could respond, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I glanced down and froze. On the floor lay the remains of an animal. Its body was torn apart, blood pooling around it. My heart raced as the horrifying realization hit me. This wasn't just any animal. Something had slaughtered it. "Let's get out of here," I urged, my voice trembling. But Alex, ever the thrill-seeker, was already tracing odd marks on the floor with his flashlight. They looked like handprints, large, with unnaturally long fingers. "These prints, they look strange," he said, his eyes widening in excitement. I swallowed hard, feeling a sense of dread creep in. "We really shouldn't be here, man." Ignoring my warning, Alex followed the prints toward a partially open door at the end of the hall. As he pushed it further, a horrifying sight awaited us. Piles of discarded bodies, some whole, others dismembered in a grotesque display. The walls were splattered with blood, and the prints continued, leading into the shadows. A noise echoed from within the room. My blood ran cold as I realized we weren't alone. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, panic rising. "Yeah, let's go," Alex said, stepping back. But it was too late. From the darkness above, a figure descended, a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. Its skin was pale and stretched tightly over its bones, and it crawled with disturbing agility. Its eyes were hollow voids, glowing with an unnatural light, and its long fingers ended in razor-sharp claws. With a bone-chilling shriek, the creature lunged at us. We turned and sprinted back down the hall, our hearts pounding in our chests. I could hear the creature's heavy breathing behind us, its footsteps echoing in the desolate building. Just as we reached the window we had entered, I glanced back. The creature had caught up, its claws inches from Alex. In a panic, I leaped through the window, but I could hear Alex's terrified screams as he was pulled back into the darkness. I stumbled home, breathless and covered in sweat. I burst into my room, my mind racing as I recounted the horror to my family. They didn't believe me, chalking it up to youthful imagination, but I knew what I had seen. The next day, when the police searched the asylum, they found nothing. No sign of Alex, no bodies, only an echoing silence that seemed to mock their efforts. Weeks passed, and the town was left in uncertainty. I had lost my best friend, and no one believed the horror that had unfolded. Years later, I learned that the asylum had been the site of twisted experiments, places where the boundaries of life and death were blurred. And while the building was eventually demolished, I couldn't shake the feeling that the creature still lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. Every now and then, I can still hear Alex's screams echoing in my dreams, a haunting reminder of that fateful night. This was the first and last time I ever went to a haunted house attraction. I live in Fort Worth, Texas, where there's a big haunted house event every year. This year, a few friends decided they wanted to check it out, and I figured it was finally time for me to experience a haunted house. For some context, my troubled childhood left me with PTSD, but I'll explain more about that later. It was a weekend, so no one wanted to go without having a few drinks. My friend Noah hosted a pregame at his place for us. 6 of us in total. 3 guys, 2 of their girlfriends, and me. We smoked and drank in Noah's backyard, thinking it would make the haunted house experience more fun. We even bought our tickets online while we were pre-gaming. I don't usually smoke weed because it tends to make me paranoid, but I decided to give it another try that night. I felt pretty good, and the combination of alcohol and weed seemed to mellow out my usual anxieties. Eventually, we took an Uber to the attraction, which was about 20 minutes from Noah's place. There was a half-hour wait in line, and the place was packed. We chatted with the people in front of us while I was pretty cross-faded but still aware of everything going on. As we reached the front of the line, I began to feel a bit dizzy, but I didn't say anything. Once inside the haunted house, the experience was overwhelming right from the start. The actors were intense, and the atmosphere heightened my anxiety. I was starting to realize that being high wasn't helping and was actually making things worse. One of the actors seemed to notice how scared I looked and decided to focus on me. He got right in my face, shouting and making noises. I was internally panicking but tried to keep my composure. The haunted house seemed to go on forever, and each jump scare felt like it was about to make me lose it. The flashing lights and fog only added to the surreal and frightening atmosphere. Then we entered a room bathed in an eerie red glow. A man in a suit and top hat, covered in fake blood, was yelling at us as part of the act. But in the corner of the room was someone who didn't seem to be part of the show. He was just standing there, staring directly at me. It took me a moment to recognize the face. My father's face. I screamed in terror as every hair on my body stood on end. The room fell silent, and my friends initially thought I was joking. When they saw I was serious, one of the girls asked what was wrong. I pointed to the corner, but the figure was gone. My friends and the actor were confused. They knew about my difficult past, so they understood I wasn't making it up. One of my friends said that the actor had asked if I was okay. I was in a full-blown panic attack, shouting that I wanted to leave. Noah took me out through a side exit and stayed with me while the others finished the attraction. I didn't want to make everyone leave early, especially since the tickets weren't cheap. Outside, Noah tried to reassure me that it was just a hallucination and not really my father. My father had been abusive to my siblings and me, and he left us when I was 10. My close friends knew some of this background, so I didn't need to explain it to Noah in detail. When the others were done, we went to a nearby Wendy's where I tried to calm down with some food. I was embarrassed, but my friends didn't judge me openly. I went home earlier than the rest, not wanting to spoil their night. When I got home, I fell asleep almost instantly. However, because of how drunk and high I was, I had a nightmare about the haunted house scene and my father. In the dream, he was standing in the corner of the room, calling my name. I woke up to find him actually standing over my bed. He was a terrifying, towering figure, nearly 9 feet tall, bending in unnatural ways. It took me a moment to fully grasp what I was seeing, and then I screamed again. My mom rushed in, turned on the lights, and the apparition vanished. My heart was racing, and I was in tears, telling my mom I had seen Dad. It was one of the most traumatic nights of my adult life. Since then, I've avoided weed and other substances, sticking to only light alcohol, and I have no intention of ever visiting a haunted house again. If you've experienced a terrifying event or have a horror story to tell, we at AG Horrors want to hear from you. Share your experiences with us, and let's uncover the mysteries hiding in the shadows together. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories like this one.